The crack of a gunshot split the evening air as Daisy Calloway ducked behind the water trough outside Farley's General Store, her heart pounding like a stampede against her ribs. The bullet splintered wood just inches from her head, sending splinters flying. Her husband Warren's drunken roar echoed down the dusty main street of Redemption Springs. "You think you can leave me, Daisy? I'll put you in the ground first." It was 1878, and in the Arizona Territory, a woman had few rights, especially a woman trying to escape her husband. Daisy's fingers trembled as she touched the bruise darkening her cheekbone, still tender from Warren's fist the night before. 6 years of marriage had taught her Warren Blackburn never made empty threats. "Just stay where you are, Daisy." Warren's voice slurred as he staggered closer, his boots kicking up dust in the fading light. "You're my wife. You belong to me." Daisy's blue calico dress was torn at the sleeve where Warren had grabbed her when she tried sneaking away with her single carpet bag. Inside were her mother's silver hairbrush, a change of clothes, and the $37 she'd secretly saved from selling eggs and preserves at the mercantile. It wasn't much to start a new life, but it was all she had. Another shot rang out, and Daisy bit back a scream as splinters flew from the wooden trough. Warren had never been a good shot when drunk, but eventually, one bullet would find its mark. "That's quite enough of that," a deep voice drawled from the shadows of the livery stable across the street. Daisy glimpsed a tall figure step into the street, his stance easy but purposeful. The last rays of sunset glinted off a silver star pinned to his leather vest. "This ain't your business, cowboy," Warren snarled, swinging his pistol toward the newcomer. The tall man stepped fully into the light, and Daisy caught her breath. Wyatt O'Malley was Redemption Springs' new deputy, a man who'd ridden into town just 3 months ago with little more than his reputation as a fair but uncompromising lawman. His dark hair curled slightly beneath his Stetson, and his eyes were fixed steadily on Warren. "When you're shooting up my town and threatening a lady, it becomes my business," Deputy O'Malley said, his hand resting casually near his holster. "Why don't you put that gun down before you hurt someone?" Warren spat in the dirt. "She's my wife. The law says I can discipline her as I see fit." "The law doesn't say you can murder her in the street," O'Malley countered, taking another step forward. His voice remained steady, but Daisy detected the steel beneath. "Now put down that gun before I have to take it from you," Warren's face contorted with rage. "She's running away. No wife of mine walks out on me. I told her if she ever tried to leave, I'd kill her." His bloodshot eyes found Daisy cowering behind the water trough, and I meant it. Deputy O'Malley's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Then I reckon he'll have to get through me first," he said, addressing Daisy though his gaze never left Warren. The moment hung suspended like a drop of water before falling. Then Warren's arm jerked upward, aiming his pistol at the deputy. O'Malley moved like lightning. His gun cleared leather before Warren could squeeze the trigger. A single shot cracked through the evening air, and Warren howled as the bullet tore through his shooting hand, sending his pistol spinning into the dust. "You shot me," Warren bellowed, clutching his bleeding hand. "Be thankful I didn't aim higher," O'Malley replied, walking forward and kicking Warren's fallen gun away. "Warren Blackburn, I'm arresting you for public drunkenness, disturbing the peace, and attempted murder." "She's my property," Warren shouted as O'Malley wrestled him into handcuffs. "No woman is property in my town," the deputy said, his voice low but carrying clearly to where Daisy huddled, still shaking. He glanced toward her. "Madam, are you hurt?" Daisy slowly rose from behind the water trough, her legs trembling so badly she nearly collapsed again. "No," she whispered. "Not from the shooting." O'Malley's gaze took in her bruised face and his jaw tightened. With a rough shove, he pushed Warren toward the jailhouse. "We'll add wife beating to the charges." As he marched Warren away, he called over his shoulder, "Miss Martha at the boarding house has a spare room. Tell her I sent you. I'll come check on you after I lock this one up." Daisy stood in the middle of the street, clutching her carpet bag, feeling the stares of townspeople who'd emerged from shops and saloons to witness the commotion. 6 years of abuse had trained her to feel shame for what Warren did to her, as if it were somehow her fault. She lowered her eyes, unable to meet their gazes. "Don't you worry about a thing, Daisy," came a gentle voice beside her. It was Mrs. Farley from the general store, wrapping a protective arm around her shoulders. "That new deputy's a good man. Come along now, I'll walk you to Miss Martha's." The boarding house was a 2-story white clapboard building with green shutters and a wide front porch adorned with rocking chairs. Miss Martha, a plump widow with iron-gray hair and kind eyes, took one look at Daisy's bruised face and ushered her inside without a word about payment. "Any woman Deputy O'Malley sends my way gets a room, no questions asked," she said, leading Daisy up the stairs. "That man has a soft spot for folks in trouble, though he'd deny it till his dying day." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed covered in a colorful quilt, a washstand with a porcelain basin, and a single window overlooking the main street. It was the first space Daisy had to herself since marrying Warren at 17. "There's stew keeping warm in the kitchen," Miss Martha said. "You come down when you're ready, no rush." Alone for the first time, Daisy sank onto the bed and finally let the tears come. She cried for the frightened girl who'd married Warren to escape her father's harsh rule, only to find herself in a worse prison. She cried for the baby she'd lost 2 years ago after Warren pushed her down the stairs in one of his rages. She cried because, even now, she wasn't sure if she was truly free or if tomorrow Warren would somehow get out of jail and finish what he'd started. A gentle knock at her door an hour later startled her from a fitful doze. She'd been too afraid to undress or even remove her boots. Mrs. Blackburn. Deputy O'Malley's deep voice came through the door. "It's Deputy Wyatt O'Malley. I wanted to check on you, madam." Daisy quickly wiped her eyes and smoothed her hair before opening the door. The deputy stood in the hallway, hat in hand, his tall frame seeming too large for the narrow space. Up close, she could see that his eyes were a deep green, like pine trees against a stormy sky. "It's Calloway," she said softly. "My maiden name. I don't want to be Mrs. Blackburn anymore." Something like approval flashed in his eyes. "Miss Calloway, then, may I come in?" "I need to ask you some questions about what happened today." Daisy hesitated, then stepped aside. No man other than Warren had been alone with her in a room for years, and her pulse quickened with uncertainty. But there was nothing threatening in the deputy's manner as he entered, keeping a respectful distance and remaining standing when she perched nervously on the edge of the bed. "Your husband will be in jail for at least a week," O'Malley said. "Judge Wilson comes through town next Thursday. But I should warn you, unless you press charges for the beating, he'll likely only get a fine for the public disturbance." Daisy's stomach clenched. "He'll kill me if I do that." "Not if I have anything to say about it," the deputy replied, his voice hardening, "but I understand your fear. Warren Blackburn has a reputation even beyond what I saw today." "You're new here," Daisy said. "You don't know what he's capable of." "I've seen his kind before," O'Malley said quietly. "Men who feel big only when they're making others feel small." He leaned against the wall, studying her with those penetrating eyes. "Do you have family you can go to? Somewhere safe?" Daisy shook her head. "My parents died 2 years ago. There's no one." "What were you planning to do tonight, before?" "I was taking the stage to Tucson," she admitted. "I have a little money saved. I thought I could find work as a seamstress or maybe in one of the hotels." The deputy nodded thoughtfully. "The stage doesn't come through again until Tuesday. You're welcome to stay here until then. Miss Martha won't take your money." "I can't just hide here," Daisy said, twisting her hands in her lap. "Warren has friends in town. They'll tell him where I am." "Let me worry about that," O'Malley said. "For now, you're under my protection." There was something in the way he said it, not as if she were a burden or an obligation, but as if her safety genuinely mattered to him. It had been so long since anyone had looked at Daisy and seen a person worth protecting that she hardly knew how to respond. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "You don't even know me." A slight smile touched his lips, softening the hard planes of his face. "Let's just say I've got my reasons for not tolerating men who hurt women." He pushed himself away from the wall. "Get some rest, Miss Calloway. I'll check on you tomorrow." As he reached for the door handle, Daisy found her voice again. "Thank you," she said, "for stopping him, for everything." O'Malley nodded once, settling his hat back on his head. "Just doing my job, madam," but they both knew it was more than that. The next morning, Daisy awoke to sunlight streaming through the window and the unfamiliar sensation of safety. For the first time in years, she hadn't been startled awake by Warren's angry voice or rough hands. She washed her face in the basin, wincing as she touched the bruise on her cheekbone, and changed into her spare dress of faded blue cotton that had once belonged to her mother. Downstairs, Miss Martha was bustling around the kitchen, feeding her 4 other boarders 2 salesmen passing through town, an elderly schoolteacher, and the young man who worked at the telegraph office. They all glanced up when Daisy entered, and she braced herself for judgment or pity. "Morning, dear," Miss Martha said cheerfully. "Sit yourself down. Eggs and biscuits coming right up." The others nodded politely and returned to their breakfast, treating her presence as nothing unusual. The normalcy of it brought a lump to Daisy's throat. "Deputy O'Malley came by earlier," Miss Martha said, placing a heaping plate in front of Daisy. "Asked me to tell you he'll stop by around noon to take you to get your things from your house if you're feeling up to it." Fear flickered through Daisy. "My things." "Can't start a new life without your belongings, can you?" Miss Martha said pragmatically. "Don't you worry. The deputy will be with you the whole time and Warren's locked up tight." After breakfast, Daisy helped Miss Martha with the dishes, finding comfort in the simple domestic task. The older woman chatted easily about town gossip, never once asking about Daisy's situation or the bruises on her face. It was a kindness Daisy hadn't expected. At noon precisely, Deputy O'Malley's tall frame filled the doorway of the boarding house. He'd shaved, Daisy noticed, and his dark hair was still damp from washing. "Miss Calloway," he greeted her with a tip of his hat. "If you're ready, I thought we might retrieve your personal items from your home." Daisy's hands twisted in her apron. I don't know if I can go back there." Understanding softened his expression. "I'll be right beside you. Warren's in a cell and I've got the only key." "You don't understand," she whispered. "That house, it holds 6 years of bad memories. All the more reason to get whatever's important to you and never go back," he said gently. A clean break. Something in his tone gave Daisy courage. She untied her apron and reached for the worn shawl Miss Martha had lent her. "All right," she said, "but we need to be quick." The Blackburn house stood at the edge of town, a small, weathered structure that had once been painted white, but had faded to a dingy gray. The front porch sagged on one side, and the yard was littered with empty bottles and debris. Looking at it now, through the eyes of a woman planning to leave forever, Daisy felt a wave of shame that she'd lived in such squalor. "It wasn't always like this," she said softly as O'Malley helped her down from his horse. "When we first married, I kept it nice, planted flowers out front." "What happened to the flowers?" he asked, his hand lingering supportively under her elbow. "Warren trampled them one night when he came home drunk," she replied. "Said they were a waste of water. I never planted any more after that." Inside, the house was dark and stale-smelling. Unwashed dishes filled the sink, and empty whiskey bottles cluttered every surface. Daisy moved quickly to the bedroom, avoiding O'Malley's eyes, not wanting to see his reaction to the sordid conditions Warren had forced her to live in. In the bedroom, she pulled a small trunk from under the bed and began filling it with her meager possessions: a few dresses, undergarments, a winter coat, a faded daguerreotype of her parents. From a loose floorboard beneath the bed, she retrieved a small cloth bag. "My mother's wedding ring," she explained when she caught O'Malley watching her. "I hid it after Warren tried to sell it for whiskey money." In the kitchen, she added a few practical items: her sewing kit, a good knife, a cast iron skillet that had been her grandmother's. Everything she valued from 6 years of marriage fit into one small trunk. "Is that all?" O'Malley asked when she indicated she was finished. Daisy looked around the shabby house one last time and nodded. "There's nothing else here worth taking." As they stepped back outside, Daisy felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Even the air seemed fresher away from the house that had been her prison for so long. "What will happen to it?" she asked as O'Malley secured her trunk to his horse. "The house," he shrugged. "It belongs to Warren, I suppose, unless you have a claim on it." "I want nothing of his," Daisy said firmly. O'Malley helped her mount his horse, then swung up behind her. The closeness made her tense momentarily. She wasn't accustomed to such proximity with any man but Warren. and those interactions had rarely been gentle. But the deputy maintained a respectful distance, his arms reaching around her only to hold the reins. As they rode back toward town, Daisy caught sight of two men watching them from outside the saloon. Pete Dillon and Jack Foster, Warren's drinking companions. Their narrowed eyes and scowling faces sent a chill down her spine. "Warren's friends," she murmured to O'Malley. He nodded almost imperceptibly. "I see them. They'll tell him I came back for my things, that I'm planning to leave for good. Let them," O'Malley said, his voice hardened with resolve. "You have every right to go." Back at the boarding house, Miss Martha helped Daisy unpack her trunk while the deputy returned to his duties. The older woman clucked sympathetically at the modest collection of belongings. "Well, it's a start," she said bracingly, "and sometimes a fresh start is what we need." "I'm scared," Daisy admitted, carefully folding a dress into the small bureau. "I've never been on my own before. I went from my father's house straight to Warren's." Miss Martha patted her hand. "It's about time you found out who Daisy Calloway is then, without any man telling you." That evening, Daisy helped Miss Martha serve dinner to the boarders. The routine of domestic work calmed her nerves, and for a few hours, she almost forgot the precariousness of her situation. Deputy O'Malley joined them for the meal, taking the seat beside Daisy. His solid presence was reassuring, though he spoke little, letting the schoolteacher dominate the conversation with tales of her unruly pupils. After dinner, when the other boarders had retired to their rooms or the parlor, O'Malley asked Daisy to join him on the front porch. The evening was pleasantly cool, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "I spoke with Judge Wilson by telegraph," he said without preamble. "Explained your situation. He's agreed to hear your case first when he arrives, and he's willing to consider a divorce petition." Daisy's breath caught. "A divorce? Is that even possible?" "It's not common," O'Malley admitted, "but in cases of cruelty and abuse it can be granted. The judge is a fair man." Hope bloomed in Daisy's chest, fragile but persistent. "What would I need to do?" "Write out your statement, everything Warren's done to you over the years. The judge will want specifics." O'Malley's expression was grim. "I know it won't be easy to relive those memories, but it's necessary." The thought of putting 6 years of abuse into words made Daisy's stomach clench. "And if the judge grants the divorce, what then? Warren won't just let me go." O'Malley leaned against the porch railing, his profile strong against the evening sky. "One step at a time, Miss Calloway. First we get the legal papers in order, then we deal with Warren." "We?" Daisy questioned softly. O'Malley turned to face her fully. "I gave you my word that I'd protect you. I don't make promises lightly." Something in his steady gaze made Daisy believe him. For the first time since she'd fled her home the previous day, she allowed herself to truly consider a future without Warren, a future where she was free. "Tell me something, deputy," she said. "Why do you care what happens to me?" "Most lawmen would have just locked Warren up for the night and told me to go home with him in the morning." O'Malley was quiet for a long moment, his eyes focused on something distant. "My mother," he finally said, his voice low. "She was married to a man like Warren. Mean when he drank, and he drank most days. I was 10 years old when he beat her so badly she couldn't get out of bed for a week. No one in town would help her, not the sheriff, not the preacher, no one. They all said it was a private matter between a man and his wife." He paused, his jaw working with old anger. The next time he came at her, she shot him, right in the chest with his own hunting rifle. They hanged her 3 weeks later. Daisy's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Wyatt," she whispered, using his given name without thinking. "I'm so sorry. I swore then that if I ever had the power to help a woman in that situation, I would," he continued. "No woman should have to choose between enduring abuse and hanging for stopping it." The raw pain in his voice touched something deep inside Daisy. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand on his arm. "Thank you for telling me." His larger hand covered hers briefly, the touch gentle but strong. "Get some rest, Miss Calloway. Tomorrow we start building your case." The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. In the mornings, Daisy helped Miss Martha with the boarding house chores, finding comfort in the simple tasks. In the afternoons, she sat at the small desk in her room, painstakingly writing out her experiences with Warren. It was agonizing work. forcing herself to remember moments she'd spent years trying to forget. But O'Malley had been right, the judge would need details. Each evening, the deputy would stop by to check on her progress and provide updates on Warren, who remained in jail, growing increasingly belligerent as his forced sobriety continued. On the third day, O'Malley arrived with a troubled expression. "Warren's friends have been asking questions," he said once they were seated in Miss Martha's small parlor. "They've been watching the boarding house." Fear prickled along Daisy's spine. "Do you think they're planning something?" "I don't know," O'Malley admitted, "but I don't trust them. Until the judge arrives, I think you should stay inside as much as possible, and never alone." The warning cast a shadow over Daisy's fragile sense of security. That night, she lay awake listening to every creak and settling sound in the old boarding house, imagining Warren somehow escaping his cell or his friends breaking in to drag her back to him. The next morning, a telegram arrived for Deputy O'Malley. Judge Wilson's circuit had been delayed by flooding further south. He wouldn't arrive in Redemption Springs for at least another 2 weeks. "I can't keep Warren locked up that long without formal charges," O'Malley explained grimly when he delivered the news to Daisy. "The most I can hold him is another 4 days. Daisy's hard-won composure crumbled. "Then what am I supposed to do? He'll kill me, Wyatt. He promised he would." "The stage to Tucson leaves tomorrow," O'Malley said. "You could be on it. Get far away from here before Warren's released." "And go where? Do what?" "I've never been further than 20 miles from this town." O'Malley ran a hand through his dark hair, frustration evident in the gesture. "I have a friend in Santa Fe, a widow who runs a respectable boarding house. She could use help and she'd give you a place to stay. You'd be safe there until the divorce can be arranged." The thought of traveling so far alone terrified Daisy, but the alternative, staying and facing Warren's vengeance, was worse. "All right," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll go to Santa Fe." O'Malley looked relieved. "I'll write to Mrs. Hollister today and purchase your ticket for tomorrow's stage." That evening, as Daisy carefully packed her few belongings once again, a commotion erupted downstairs. She froze at the sound of angry male voices, then her blood ran cold as she recognized one of them, Pete Dillon, Warren's closest friend. "I know she's here," Pete was shouting. "Warren's wife, he sent me to fetch her." "There's no one here by that description," Miss Martha's firm voice replied. "And I'll thank you to lower your voice in my establishment. You're hiding her, you old witch. Warren says she stole money from him before she ran off. I'm here to collect what's his." Daisy's heart pounded as she heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Without thinking, she grabbed her carpet bag and slipped out of her room, looking desperately for somewhere to hide. The window at the end of the hallway opened onto the roof of the kitchen extension. She climbed through just as Pete reached the top of the stairs. The sloped roof was slippery with evening dew. Daisy edged carefully toward the edge where a drain pipe offered a possible escape route to the ground. She'd just reached it when she heard Pete's angry exclamation from her empty room. "She's been here. These are her things." The window slammed open and Pete leaned out, his eyes widening when he spotted her on the roof. "There you are, you thieving bitch." He lunged through the window, his large frame barely squeezing through the opening. Daisy scrambled to the drain pipe, gripping it with trembling hands as she tried to lower herself. The pipe creaked ominously under her weight. Pete was halfway across the roof now, his face contorted with rage. "Warren's gonna teach you a lesson you won't forget," he growled. The drain pipe suddenly pulled away from the wall with a screech of metal. Daisy screamed as she fell, landing hard in the alley beside the boarding house. Pain shot through her ankle, but fear gave her strength. She staggered to her feet just as Pete began climbing down after her. A figure appeared at the mouth of the alley. Wyatt O'Malley, his gun already drawn. "That's far enough, Dillon," he called, his voice ringing with authority. Pete froze halfway down the drain pipe. "This ain't your business, deputy. I'm just collecting Warren's property." "The only property I see is Miss Martha's drain pipe, which you're currently destroying," O'Malley replied coldly. "Now get down from there and clear out, or join your friend in a cell." For a moment, Daisy thought Pete might defy the deputy, but self-preservation won out. He climbed down, spitting on the ground near Daisy's feet before slouching away. "This ain't over," he muttered. Warren ain't gonna forget this. O'Malley kept his gun trained on Pete until he disappeared around the corner, then rushed to Daisy's side. She was leaning against the wall, her face pale with pain and fear. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes sweeping over her. "My ankle," she gasped. "I think I twisted it when I fell." Without hesitation, O'Malley lifted her into his arms. The sudden closeness startled Daisy, but there was nothing threatening in his hold, only concern and protection. He carried her through the back door of the boarding house, where an alarmed Miss Martha directed him to place her on the kitchen settle. "Pete Dillon came looking for her," O'Malley explained grimly as Miss Martha examined Daisy's swelling ankle. "Said Warren sent him to collect what's his." "Warren's still in jail, isn't he?" Daisy asked, wincing as Miss Martha gently probed the injury. O'Malley nodded. "He is. But he's allowed visitors, must have sent Pete with instructions." "It's just a bad sprain," Miss Martha announced, wrapping Daisy's ankle in a cold, wet cloth. "But you won't be walking far on it for a few days." Daisy's heart sank, "But the stage leaves tomorrow." O'Malley and Miss Martha exchanged a look. "You can't travel like this," the older woman said gently. "Not alone on a stage that rough." "I have to," Daisy insisted. "Warren will be released in 4 days. I can't be here when that happens." O'Malley paced the kitchen, his expression troubled. Finally, he stopped, having come to some decision. "There's another option," he said. "My cabin. It's about 15 miles outside town, up in the foothills. No one knows about it except me. You'd be safe there until you can travel." Alone in a cabin with a man she barely knows. Miss Martha frowned. "That's hardly proper, Wyatt. I wouldn't stay," he clarified quickly. "I'd take her there, make sure she's settled, then come back to town. I need to be here anyway when Warren's released to make sure he doesn't cause more trouble." Miss Martha still looked dubious, but Daisy was considering the suggestion. The thought of being alone in a remote cabin was frightening, but less so than the prospect of facing Warren. "How would I get to Santa Fe from there?" she asked. "There's a small settlement about 5 miles beyond my place, Copper Creek," O'Malley explained. "The stage from there connects to the main line to Santa Fe. Once your ankle's healed, you could make your way there." It wasn't an ideal plan, but Daisy couldn't see any better options. "All right," she agreed. "When do we leave?" "First light tomorrow," O'Malley said. "I'll bring a wagon. The trail's too rough for the stage, especially with your injured ankle." That night, Daisy slept fitfully, her dreams haunted by Warren's rage and the sensation of falling. She awoke before dawn, dressing carefully to avoid putting weight on her injured ankle. Miss Martha had prepared a basket of food and supplies enough to last Daisy a week at the cabin. "You be careful up there alone," the older woman cautioned as she helped Daisy down the back stairs. "Deputy O'Malley's a good man, but that cabin's a far cry from civilization." "I'll be fine," Daisy assured her, though her voice lacked conviction. "It's only for a few days." O'Malley arrived with a wagon just as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. He'd lined the back with blankets to make it more comfortable for Daisy's journey. With his strong hands supporting her, Daisy managed to climb onto the wagon seat beside him. "Thank you for everything, Miss Martha," she said, fighting back tears as she realized this might be the last time she saw the kind woman who had sheltered her. "You write to me when you get settled in Santa Fe," Miss Martha instructed, pressing a small package into Daisy's hands. "And take this, my mother's recipe book. Every woman needs good recipes to start a new life." The gesture was so unexpected and thoughtful that Daisy couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She merely nodded, clutching the slim volume to her chest as O'Malley clicked to the horses, and the wagon began to move. They left town via back roads, avoiding the main street where early risers might spot them. Once beyond the town limits, O'Malley turned the wagon onto a narrow trail that wound upward into the foothills. The terrain grew increasingly rugged, with pine trees replacing the scrub and cacti of the lower elevations. "It's beautiful up here," Daisy remarked after they'd been traveling for several hours. The air was cooler and smelled of pine sap and earth. "That's why I chose it," O'Malley replied. "Reminds me of where I grew up in Colorado. How long have you had the cabin?" She asked, genuinely curious about this man who had risked so much to help her. "Built it 2 years ago, soon after I took the deputy position," he said. I needed somewhere, apart from everything, somewhere quiet. Daisy understood the sentiment all too well. How many times had she longed for a place of her own, away from Warren's fists and bitter words? The journey took most of the day, with O'Malley stopping occasionally to let the horses rest or to help Daisy stretch her injured leg. By mid-afternoon, the trail narrowed further, becoming little more than a game path through thick stands of pine and aspen. Not much farther now, O'Malley assured her as the wagon jolted over a particularly rough section. The cabin's just beyond that next ridge. When they finally crested the ridge, Daisy caught her breath at the vista that opened before them. A small meadow stretched below, bordered by dark pines and dotted with wildflowers. A clear stream cut through the center of the clearing, and beside it stood a sturdy log cabin with a stone chimney. It was simple but well built, with a covered porch and windows that caught the afternoon sunlight. "You built this?" Daisy asked, impressed by the craftsmanship evident even from a distance. O'Malley nodded, a hint of pride in his voice. "Every log. Took me most of a summer." He guided the wagon down to the cabin and helped Daisy inside. The interior was sparse but comfortable, a main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area with a cast iron stove, a wooden table with 2 chairs, and a narrow bed in the corner. A bearskin rug covered part of the plank floor, and shelves lined one wall, holding books, supplies, and a few personal items. "It's not much," O'Malley said, sounding almost apologetic as he helped Daisy to a chair. "But it's solid. You'll be safe here." "It's lovely," Daisy said sincerely. After the squalor of the house she'd shared with Warren, the cabin's clean simplicity felt like luxury. "I can see why you come here to find peace." O'Malley busied himself lighting a fire in the hearth, then brought in Daisy's belongings and the supplies Miss Martha had packed. He showed her where everything was kept: water from the stream, wood for the fire, extra blankets for the cool nights. "The settlement I mentioned, Copper Creek, is due east, following the stream," he explained as he prepared to leave. "Once your ankle's strong enough, it's about a 3-hour walk. There's a small trading post there where the stage stops once a week." Daisy nodded, a flutter of anxiety rising in her chest at the thought of being left alone in this remote place. "When will you return?" "As soon as Warren's released, and I'm sure he's not causing trouble," O'Malley promised. 4 days at most. Will you be all right until then?" Daisy straightened her shoulders. "I've survived 6 years with Warren Blackburn. I can manage a few days in paradise by comparison." A smile touched O'Malley's lips, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his serious face, softening the lines around his eyes and revealing a small dimple in his right cheek. "There's a pistol in the drawer beside the bed," he said, suddenly serious again. "Do you know how to use it?" Daisy shook her head. O'Malley took the weapon from the drawer and carefully showed her how to load and fire it. "Only in an emergency," he cautioned, "but I want you to have it, just in case." The weight of the pistol in her hands was unfamiliar but oddly comforting. It represented something she'd never had with Warren, a means to protect herself. "I'll return as soon as I can," O'Malley promised as he prepared to leave. He hesitated at the door, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Be careful, Daisy." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something in the way he said it made her heart beat a little faster. "You too, Wyatt," she replied softly. After he left, the cabin seemed suddenly larger and eerily quiet. Daisy hobbled to the window and watched until his wagon disappeared over the ridge. Then, alone for the first time in days, she allowed herself to truly exhale. The next 3 days passed in a strange, peaceful isolation. Daisy's ankle improved steadily with rest, and by the 3rd day, she could walk with only a slight limp. She spent her time exploring the cabin and its immediate surroundings, reading O'Malley's small collection of books, and practicing with the pistol until she felt reasonably confident in her ability to use it if necessary. There was something profoundly healing about the solitude and the rhythm of simple tasks: building the fire each morning, fetching water from the stream, watching deer graze in the meadow at dusk. For the first time in years, Daisy felt herself breathing freely, thinking clearly without the constant fear of Warren's unpredictable rages. On the 4th day, She was sitting on the cabin's porch, enjoying the afternoon sunshine and working on mending a tear in one of her dresses, when she heard the distant sound of hooves. Her heart leapt with relief. Wyatt was returning as promised. But as the rider came into view over the ridge, Daisy's blood ran cold. It wasn't O'Malley's wagon. It was a single horseman, and even at a distance, she recognized the stocky build and slouched riding posture of Pete Dillon. Fear paralyzed her for a crucial moment. How had he found the cabin? Had he followed them that day? Or had something happened to Wyatt, forcing him to reveal the location? Daisy scrambled inside, closing and barring the door. She grabbed the pistol from beside the bed, her hands shaking as she checked that it was loaded as O'Malley had shown her. Then she positioned herself by the window, out of sight but able to see Pete approaching. He rode directly to the cabin, dismounting with a grunt and tying his horse to the porch railing. His face was flushed, and even from a distance, Daisy could tell he'd been drinking. "I know you're in there, Daisy," he called, his voice slurred. "Warren wants a word with his lovely wife." Daisy's heart pounded. "Warren's in jail," she called back, trying to keep her voice steady. Pete laughed, an ugly sound. "Not anymore, he ain't. Judge came early, let him out this morning with just a fine." He spat tobacco juice onto the porch. "Your deputy friend tried to stop it, but the law's the law. A man's got rights to his wife." "I'm not coming with you, Pete," Daisy said firmly, though her hands trembled on the pistol. "Tell Warren I'm filing for divorce." Pete's face darkened. "No wife of Warren's is getting no divorce. He sent me to bring you back alive or dead. He don't much care which anymore." He pulled a pistol from his belt and fired at the cabin's door, the bullet splintering wood. Daisy dropped to the floor with a scream. "Next one's coming through the window," Pete shouted. "Unless you come out right now," Daisy's mind raced. She couldn't stay in the cabin, it offered little protection from bullets. But if she ran outside, Pete would grab her. Her only advantage was that he didn't seem to know she was armed. "All right," she called. "Don't shoot anymore, I'm coming out." She tucked the pistol into the pocket of her skirt, its weight unfamiliar and heavy against her thigh. With a deep breath, she unbarred the door and stepped onto the porch, keeping her hands visible. Pete leered at her, his pistol aimed at her chest. "That's more like it. Warren's waiting down in Copper Creek. Got a nice welcome planned for his runaway bride." "I'm not going back to him," Daisy said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Not ever again." "Ain't up to you," Pete growled, gesturing with his gun. "Now move." "Where's Deputy O'Malley?" Daisy asked, stalling as she tried to work out when she could reach for her hidden pistol. A nasty grin spread across Pete's face. "Warren and the boys caught him by surprise when they let Warren out. He's probably still unconscious in the alley behind the jail." His expression darkened. "That is, if Jack didn't get carried away with that iron bar." Horror and rage surged through Daisy in equal measure. The thought of Wyatt hurt or worse because of her made something inside her snap. Without consciously deciding to move, she drew the pistol from her pocket. Pete's eyes widened in surprise, but his reactions were slowed by alcohol. Before he could adjust his aim, Daisy fired. The recoil was stronger than she expected, sending her stumbling backward. But her shot found its mark. Pete howled as the bullet tore through his shooting arm, his own pistol falling to the porch boards. "You shot me." He bellowed, clutching his bleeding arm, an unintentional echo of Warren's words the day O'Malley had disarmed him in town. "And I'll shoot again if you don't get on your horse and ride away," Daisy warned, steadying the pistol with both hands now. "Tell Warren it's over. If he comes near me again, I won't aim for the arm." There must have been something in her face, some new hardness born of desperation that convinced Pete she meant it. Cursing, he staggered to his horse, awkwardly mounting with his injured arm. "Warren's gonna kill you for this," he threatened as he wheeled his horse around. "Slow and painful. He'll have to find me first," Daisy replied. She kept the pistol trained on Pete until he disappeared over the ridge. Only then did she allow her trembling legs to give way, sinking onto the porch steps as reaction set in. She had shot a man. And worse, Wyatt was hurt, possibly dying because he had tried to protect her. Daisy knew she couldn't stay at the cabin. If Pete had found it, Warren would too. And she couldn't bear the thought of Wyatt lying injured while she hid in the mountains. Despite her still tender ankle, she gathered her essentials into her carpet bag. strapped on the pistol belt she'd found in O'Malley's trunk, and set out toward Copper Creek. She had no clear plan beyond finding help for Wyatt, but the 3 days in the cabin had given her something she'd lacked for years: courage and clarity of purpose. The walk to Copper Creek was arduous. Her ankle throbbed with each step, and the unfamiliar mountain trails slowed her progress. It was nearly dusk when she finally caught sight of the small settlement, a cluster of buildings nestled in a narrow valley. Copper Creek proved to be little more than a trading post, a livery stable, a small church, and a handful of houses. Daisy approached cautiously, uncertain whether Warren might be waiting as Pete had claimed. She spotted a weathered sign for the trading post and made her way toward it, hoping to find information or assistance. The proprietor, a grizzled man with one eye, regarded her suspiciously when she entered. "Don't get many lone women wandering in at this hour," he commented. "You lost, miss. I'm looking for someone who might help me get to Redemption Springs urgently," Daisy explained, deciding honesty was her best approach. "A friend is injured there." The man's expression didn't change. "Stage don't come through until Thursday. No other regular transport." Daisy's heart sank. Thursday was 3 days away, too long if Wyatt was seriously hurt. "Is there anyone who might take me? I can pay." She had little money, but she'd gladly give every cent to reach Wyatt. The proprietor scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Illy Morgan's heading that way at first light, delivering supplies, might take a passenger for the right price." "Where can I find him?" "Cabin behind the livery." "But I wouldn't go disturbing him this late." Daisy was already moving toward the door, her determination overriding caution. "Thank you." Outside, dusk had deepened into twilight. Daisy made her way carefully to the livery stable, her hand never straying far from the pistol at her waist. The cabin behind it was small but well-maintained, with light showing around the edges of the shuttered windows. She knocked firmly on the door. After a moment, it opened to reveal a tall, lean man with graying hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His sharp eyes took in her dusty appearance and the pistol at her hip. "Whatever you're selling, I ain't buying," he said gruffly, starting to close the door. "Please," Daisy said quickly. "Mr. Morgan, I need passage to Redemption Springs tomorrow. I was told you're heading that way." The man paused, studying her more carefully. "What's a woman like you doing out here alone, and armed at that?" "It's a long story," Daisy sighed. "But someone I care about is hurt, and I need to get to him as quickly as possible." Something in her desperate tone must have reached him. Morgan's stern expression softened slightly. "Come in, then. You can explain while I finish my supper." Over a simple meal of beans and biscuits, Daisy told him an abbreviated version of her situation, enough that he understood the urgency, without revealing all the details that might identify her to Warren if word spread. "So this deputy stood up for you against your husband, and now he's hurt because of it," Morgan summarized when she'd finished. "And you're heading back into danger to help him." Daisy nodded. "I know it sounds foolish." "Sounds like loyalty," Morgan corrected. "Something rare these days." He considered her for a moment. "I'm leaving at first light. It's not a comfortable ride, just a wagon loaded with supplies, but you're welcome to come along." Relief washed over Daisy. "Thank you. I can pay." Morgan waved away her offer. "Keep your money. You might need it." He offered her the small cot in the corner of his cabin for the night, taking the floor for himself despite Daisy's protests. As she lay awake, listening to Morgan's steady breathing, Daisy tried to prepare herself for what she might find in Redemption Springs. Was Wyatt alive? Had Warren gone looking for her elsewhere? Would she be walking into a trap? None of it mattered. She had to know if Wyatt was safe. Everything else was secondary. They set out before dawn, the wagon loaded with barrels and crates bound for Redemption Springs General Store. The road was rough, but Daisy barely noticed the discomfort, her thoughts fixed on Wyatt and what awaited her in town. Morgan was a man of few words, which suited Daisy's mood. But as they neared Redemption Springs by mid-afternoon, he finally broke his silence. "You have a plan for when we get there?" he asked. "If your husband's looking for you, walking openly into town isn't wise." "I need to find out what happened to Deputy O'Malley," Daisy replied. "After that, I don't know." Morgan nodded thoughtfully. "I'll take you to Doc Wilson's first. If the deputy was hurt bad, that's where he'd be. You can wait in the wagon while I ask around." It was a sensible suggestion, and Daisy agreed gratefully. As they approached the outskirts of town, she pulled her shawl over her head, obscuring her face from casual observation. Redemption Springs looked unchanged from when she'd left it 5 days earlier, the dusty main street lined with familiar buildings. Morgan drove directly to the doctor's small house at the edge of town, positioning the wagon so that Daisy remained hidden from the street. "Wait here," he instructed. "I'll see what I can find out." The minutes stretched endlessly as Daisy waited, every passing rider or pedestrian making her shrink further into the shadows of the wagon. Finally, Morgan returned, his expression grave. "Your deputy's alive," he said without preamble. "Took a bad beating, broken ribs, concussion, but Doc says he'll recover. He's inside." Relief made Daisy light-headed. "And my husband, Warren Blackburn," Morgan's mouth tightened. "He's been drinking at the saloon since morning, telling anyone who'll listen how he's going to find his runaway wife and teach her a lesson. Pete Dillon showed up a couple hours ago with a bullet in his arm, claiming he was ambushed by bandits. That got Blackburn all fired up." Daisy's momentary relief evaporated. "I need to see Wyatt Deputy O'Malley, then I need to get far away from here before Warren finds me." Morgan helped her down from the wagon and escorted her to the doctor's back door, keeping a watchful eye for observers. Doc Wilson, a thin man with spectacles and a perpetually worried expression, admitted them with minimal questions. "He's been asking for you," the doctor told Daisy as he led her to a small room off the main examination area. "Tried to get up and go looking for you himself this morning until the pain put him right back down." Wyatt lay on a narrow bed, his torso bandaged tightly, one eye swollen shut, and dark bruises mottling his face. Despite his injuries, he struggled to sit up when Daisy entered. "Daisy," he breathed, relief evident in his voice. "You're safe. Don't try to move," she urged, rushing to his side. "I'm fine. Pete found the cabin, but I handled it." A ghost of a smile touched Wyatt's battered face. "You handled Pete Dillon. I'd like to have seen that." "I shot him," Daisy admitted, "in the arm, just like you showed me." Wyatt's good eye widened in surprise, then crinkled with something like pride. "Good girl." "What happened to you?" Daisy asked, gently taking his hand. "Pete said Warren and his friends attacked you." Wyatt's expression darkened. "Ambushed me when Warren was released. Judge came early, reduced the charges to a misdemeanor. I tried to argue, but..." He winced as he shifted position. 3 against 1 aren't great odds, especially when they come from behind. "This is all my fault," Daisy whispered, guilt washing over her. "You were hurt because of me." "No," Wyatt said firmly, his fingers tightening around hers. "This is Warren's fault, not yours, never yours." Doc Wilson cleared his throat from the doorway. "I hate to interrupt, but Miss Calloway shouldn't stay long. Word travels fast in this town." Morgan, who had been standing guard near the door, nodded in agreement. "We should go soon. I know somewhere safe you can stay until you're well enough to travel, Deputy." Wyatt's brow furrowed. "We." "Illy Morgan," the man introduced himself. "Found your friend here in Copper Creek, brought her back when she heard you were hurt." "You came back for me?" Wyatt asked Daisy softly. "Even knowing Warren was here." "Of course I did," she replied simply. "It hadn't been a choice, really." The moment she'd heard he was injured, there had been no alternative. "You shouldn't have," he said, though his eyes said otherwise. "It's not safe for you here." "It's not safe for either of you," Doc Wilson interjected practically. "Warren Blackburn's been making threats all over town." "Against both of you." "My sister's place," Morgan suggested. "About 10 miles west of here. She's a widow, lives alone. Blackburn would never think to look there, and she'd welcome the company. You could rest up there, Deputy, until you're fit to travel." It was a solution that made sense, but Daisy hesitated. "What about Warren? He'll just keep looking, and when he can't find us, he might hurt someone else trying to get information." "Leave Warren to me," Morgan said, a steely edge entering his voice. "I've dealt with his kind before." Wyatt studied the older man thoughtfully. "You were a lawman once, weren't you?" A flicker of surprise crossed Morgan's weathered face. "Texas Rangers, long time ago. How'd you know?" "The way you stand, the way you assess a situation," Wyatt replied. "Once a lawman, always a lawman." Morgan acknowledged this with a slight nod. "All the more reason to trust me when I say I can handle Warren Blackburn while you two get to safety." Wyatt tried again to sit up, grimacing with pain. I can't just run away. I'm the deputy here. It's my job to deal with men like Blackburn. Your job is to recover, Doc Wilson said firmly, pushing him back down. And to stay alive. You can't do either if Warren finds you like this. He's right, Daisy said softly. Please, Wyatt, I couldn't bear it if something worse happened to you because of me. The use of his given name seemed to reach him in a way the logical arguments hadn't. Wyatt sighed, then nodded reluctantly. All right, but just until I'm well enough to handle this properly. Morgan left to make arrangements while Doc Wilson prepared a wagon with a mattress for transporting Wyatt. Daisy remained by his side, her hand still clasped in his, a wordless communication flowing between them. I was so afraid when Pete said they'd hurt you, she finally whispered. I thought I might be too late. Wyatt's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. It takes more than Warren Blackburn and his friends to finish me. His expression grew serious. But Daisy, you should know Warren won't stop looking. Not for either of us now. When I'm healed, we'll need to deal with him once and for all. I know, she replied, but we'll face him together. A gentle knock at the door announced Morgan's return. All set, he said. My sister's expecting us. We should move now while it's still daylight. Blackburn and his friends are still at the saloon, but that won't last forever. With Morgan's help, and despite Wyatt's stifled groans of pain, they managed to get the injured deputy into the waiting wagon. Daisy rode beside him, keeping him stable as Morgan drove them out of town by back roads, avoiding the main street where they might be seen. Morgan's sister, Martha, proved to be a practical, no-nonsense woman with kind eyes that reminded Daisy of Miss Martha from the boarding house. Her small ranch house was neat and comfortable, with 2 spare bedrooms that she immediately offered to her unexpected guests. Illy told me the situation, she said as she helped settle Wyatt in the larger of the 2 rooms. You're welcome to stay as long as needed. Warren Blackburn's reputation precedes him, even out here. Thank you, Daisy said sincerely. We won't impose longer than necessary. Martha waved away her gratitude. It's been lonely since my Henry passed. Having folks around will be a nice change. The next few days established a new routine. Wyatt's injuries began to heal, though he remained in considerable pain. Daisy tended to him with gentle efficiency, changing bandages, applying the poultices Doc Wilson had sent, and ensuring he rested properly. Morgan came and went, bringing supplies and news from town. Warren, he reported, was growing increasingly volatile, drinking heavily and threatening anyone he suspected of helping Daisy or Wyatt. He'd even fired shots through the window of the boarding house, though fortunately no one had been hurt. He's spinning out of control, Morgan said grimly during one of his visits. The town's getting tired of it, but without a lawman to stand up to him, no one's willing to make a move. I need to get back there, Wyatt insisted, though he still couldn't stand without support. It's my responsibility. Your responsibility is to heal, Daisy told him firmly. Besides, Morgan has a plan. The plan, as it turned out, involved bringing Judge Wilson directly to Martha's ranch to hear Daisy's petition for divorce and to issue a warrant for Warren's arrest on the charge of assaulting a peace officer. Morgan had sent a message to the judge, explaining the situation in full. If we can't go to the law, we'll bring the law to us, Morgan explained. A week after their arrival at the ranch, Judge Wilson arrived a portly, dignified man with shrewd eyes and a reputation for fairness. He listened carefully as Daisy presented her written account of Warren's abuse, questioning her gently but thoroughly about specific incidents. Wyatt, now able to sit up in a chair for short periods, provided testimony about Warren's threats and the assault on himself. The judge took copious notes, his expression growing increasingly grave. Based on the evidence before me, he finally declared, I find sufficient cause to grant an immediate dissolution of marriage between Daisy Calloway and Warren Blackburn on the grounds of cruelty and attempted murder. He handed Daisy a document bearing his official seal. This divorce decree is effective immediately. You are legally free of that man, Mrs. Calloway. Tears sprang to Daisy's eyes as she accepted the paper. After 6 years of living in fear, she was legally free. The judge wasn't finished, however. Additionally, he continued, I am issuing warrants for the arrest of Warren Blackburn and Peter Dillon on charges of assault on a peace officer, attempted murder, and obstruction of justice. He handed these documents to Morgan. As a former Texas Ranger, Mr. Morgan, I am temporarily deputizing you to execute these warrants, given Deputy O'Malley's incapacitation. Morgan accepted the responsibility with a solemn nod. I'll see to it, Judge. After the judge departed, Daisy sat beside Wyatt on the porch, the divorce decree clutched in her hands like a precious talisman. I can hardly believe it, she whispered. I'm free. Wyatt's hand covered hers, warm and reassuring. You deserve to be free, Daisy, you always did. She looked up at him, studying the strong lines of his face, now healing from the worst of the bruising. Over the past week, as she tended his injuries and they'd talked through the long evenings, something had shifted between them. What had begun as gratitude and duty had deepened into something neither of them had yet named. What happens now? She asked softly. After Warren's arrested, Wyatt's gaze held her steadily. That depends on what you want, Daisy. The stage to Santa Fe still runs if that's what you choose. And if I choose something else? A guarded hope flickered in his eyes. What would that be? Before Daisy could answer, hoofbeats sounded on the approach to the ranch. They both tensed but relaxed when they recognized Morgan riding toward them. Warren's gone, he announced without preamble as he dismounted. Left town yesterday with Pete and Jack Foster. Barkeeper at the saloon says they were headed for Texas. He gave up, Daisy asked, disbelieving. Warren had never given up on anything in his life. Morgan shook his head. Not likely. My guess is they're planning to lie low for a while, then come back when we're not expecting them. Or follow us if we leave, Wyatt added grimly. Warren's not the type to forgive and forget. So we're still not safe, Daisy concluded, her brief moment of freedom darkening with renewed fear. Not yet, Morgan agreed. But now we have the law on our side, and with those warrants, any lawman in any territory can arrest them on sight. Wyatt pushed himself straighter in his chair, wincing slightly at the movement. I need to get back to town. If Warren comes back, the people there need protection. You're still healing, Daisy protested. You can barely walk across the room. I'm well enough to sit in a chair at the jail with a shotgun across my lap, Wyatt countered. That's all I need to do to let people know the law is back in Redemption Springs. Morgan nodded in agreement. He's right. Word that the deputy's back would go a long way toward restoring order, and it might draw Warren out if he's still around. Using yourself as bait, Daisy asked, alarmed. That's too dangerous. Wyatt's hand squeezed hers gently. It's what I signed up for when I pinned on this badge, Daisy. She knew he was right, but the thought of him putting himself in danger again, especially when he was still vulnerable from his injuries, made her stomach clench with fear. Over the past weeks, Wyatt had become more than just her protector. He had become essential to her in ways she was only beginning to understand. The next morning, despite Daisy's continued protests, Morgan helped Wyatt into a wagon for the journey back to Redemption Springs. His movements were stiff and obviously painful, but his determination never wavered. You should stay here with Martha, Wyatt told Daisy as they prepared to leave. It's safer. No, Daisy replied firmly. If you're going, I'm going too. When he started to object, she added, someone needs to look after you until you're fully healed. And I'm tired of hiding, Wyatt. I want my life back. Pride and concern warred in his expression, but eventually he nodded. All right, but you stay at Miss Martha's boarding house, not your old place. And you're never alone, understand? Not until we know for sure Warren's gone for good. The return to Redemption Springs caused quite a stir. Word spread quickly that Deputy O'Malley was back and that Daisy Calloway, not Blackburn anymore, had returned with him. Miss Martha welcomed Daisy back to the boarding house with open arms and a room on the second floor overlooking the street. Wyatt took up residence in the small room behind the jail, his presence a visible symbol that law and order had returned to Redemption Springs. Though still moving carefully due to his healing injuries, he made a point of walking the main street each day, nodding to townspeople and making it clear that the town was under his protection once more. 3 weeks passed without sign of Warren or his friends. Gradually, life in Redemption Springs returned to normal. Daisy found work helping at the general store, and in the evenings, she would bring dinner to Wyatt at the jail, staying to talk as the desert sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "Do you still think about Santa Fe?" Wyatt asked one evening as they sat on the bench outside the jail, watching the town settle into evening routines. Daisy considered the question. "Not really," she admitted. "It was never about Santa Fe specifically, it was about escape. And now." His voice was carefully neutral, but his eyes watched her intently. "Now I'm not looking to escape anymore," she said softly. "For the first time, I'm thinking about building something instead." Wyatt's hand found hers on the bench between them. "I've been thinking about building something too." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Then Wyatt winced, his healing ribs protesting as he shifted position. Daisy smiled, both disappointed and relieved by the interruption of the moment. Whatever was growing between them needed time for both of them to heal. Time for the shadow of Warren to fade, time to be sure. But time wasn't on their side. The very next day, Warren Blackburn rode back into Redemption Springs. Daisy was working at the general store when she spotted him through the window, riding down the main street with Pete and Jack flanking him. Her blood ran cold at the sight of his familiar figure, the set of his shoulders radiating menace even from a distance. "Go out the back," Mr. Farley told her urgently, having followed her frozen gaze. "Get to the jail and warn Deputy O'Malley. I'll stall them if they come in." Daisy didn't wait to be told twice. She slipped out the store's back entrance and made her way through back alleys toward the jail, her heart pounding. Wyatt was alone there, still not fully healed and potentially outgunned. She reached the jail just as Warren and his friends were dismounting in front of the saloon across the street. Through the window, she could see Wyatt already on his feet, strapping on his gun belt. "Warren's here," she gasped as she burst through the door, "with Pete and Jack." "I saw them," Wyatt replied grimly. "Get inside the cell room and lock the door. Don't come out no matter what you hear." "Wyatt, you can't face them alone," Daisy protested. "You're still injured and there are 3 of them." "I'm not alone," he said, just as the door opened again to admit Morgan, a shotgun cradled in his arms. "I sent word to Illy when I spotted them on the ridge an hour ago." Relief flooded through Daisy. "Then let me help too, I can handle a gun now." Both men started to protest, but Daisy stood her ground. "Warren's here because of me, I won't hide while you risk your lives." After a tense moment, Wyatt nodded reluctantly. "Stay behind us." "Shoot only if you have no choice." Morgan handed her a pistol from the gun rack. "Remember your training. Aim steady, breathe out before you squeeze the trigger." The 3 of them positioned themselves strategically, Morgan by the window with the shotgun, Wyatt behind his desk with a clear view of the door, and Daisy in the corner where she had cover, but could still see the entrance. They didn't have to wait long. Heavy boots stomped onto the wooden walkway outside and the door burst open. Warren stood framed in the doorway, his face flushed with alcohol and rage. Pete and Jack flanked him, hands hovering near their holstered pistols. "Well, well," Warren sneered. "The crippled deputy and my runaway wife. How convenient to find you both in one place." "Warren Blackburn," Wyatt said formally, his voice steady despite the tension in his posture. "I have a warrant for your arrest for assault on a peace officer and attempted murder. Surrender your weapons and come peacefully." Warren laughed, an ugly sound. "You can barely stand, O'Malley, and it's 3 against 1. You're in no position to be making demands." 3 against 3, actually," Morgan corrected, stepping into view with the shotgun. "I'm also authorized to execute that warrant." Warren's confidence faltered briefly, but he recovered quickly. "Doesn't matter. I'm not here for a jail cell. I'm here for what's mine." His bloodshot eyes fixed on Daisy. "Come here, wife. It's time to go home." "I'm not your wife anymore, Warren," Daisy said, her voice steadier than she felt. She held up the divorce decree she'd taken to carrying with her. "Judge Wilson granted my divorce petition. I'm legally free of you." Rage contorted Warren's features. "No piece of paper changes what's mine. You belong to me until I say otherwise." "The only place you're going is a prison cell," Wyatt said, his hand resting on his holstered gun. "Last chance to surrender peacefully." For a moment, the tableau held 5 people poised on the edge of violence, the air thick with tension. Then Warren made his move, drawing his pistol with a roar of rage. Everything happened at once. Morgan fired the shotgun, the blast deafening in the confined space. Jack was thrown backward through the doorway, clutching his shoulder. Pete got off a wild shot that shattered the window before Wyatt's bullet caught him in the chest, dropping him to the floor. Warren, using the distraction, lunged toward Daisy. His pistol discharged, the bullet embedding itself in the wall inches from her head. Without thinking, Daisy raised her own gun and fired. Time seemed to slow as Warren's expression shifted from rage to disbelief. He looked down at the spreading red stain on his shirt, then back up at Daisy. "You shot me," he said, echoing Pete's words from the cabin. "You gave me no choice," Daisy replied, her hand steady on the pistol. Warren's knees buckled and he collapsed to the floor. Wyatt was immediately at Daisy's side, taking the gun gently from her hand as Morgan checked Warren's pulse. "He's alive," Morgan reported, "but needs a doctor right away." "Jack ran off," Wyatt noted, looking out the shattered window. "Pete's dead." The next hours passed in a blur for Daisy. Doc Wilson was summoned to treat Warren's wound, which proved serious but not immediately fatal. The sheriff from the next county arrived to take custody of the prisoners, commending Wyatt and Morgan for executing the warrants despite being outnumbered. Through it all, Daisy moved as if in a dream, answering questions mechanically when asked, helping where needed, but unable to fully process what had happened. She had shot Warren. After years of suffering his abuse, she had finally fought back in the most direct way possible. It wasn't until late that night, when the jail had been cleaned up and the prisoners transferred, that the full impact hit her. She was sitting alone in her room at the boarding house when the tears finally came, not tears of regret or fear, but of release. 6 years of pain and terror poured out of her in racking sobs. A gentle knock at her door interrupted her catharsis. "Daisy," Wyatt's voice came softly through the wood. "Are you all right?" She wiped her eyes hastily and opened the door. Wyatt stood there, concern etched on his features. Without a word, he opened his arms and Daisy stepped into his embrace, burying her face against his chest as fresh tears came. "It's over," he murmured into her hair, his arms strong and secure around her. "Really over this time. Warren's going to prison for a long time. He can't hurt you ever again." "I shot him," she whispered. "I never thought I could do something like that." "You did what you had to do," Wyatt assured her. "He gave you no choice." They stood like that for a long time, finding comfort in each other's presence. When Daisy's tears finally subsided, Wyatt gently tipped her face up to his. "I've been waiting for the right time to tell you something," he said softly. "But I'm realizing there might never be a perfect time." Daisy's heart quickened. "What is it?" "These past weeks, watching you find your strength, seeing your courage." He paused, seemingly searching for the right words. "Daisy, I've fallen in love with you. I think maybe I started falling the moment you stood up to Warren that first day." Joy bloomed in Daisy's chest, bright and unexpected. "Wyatt, I know it might be too soon," he continued hurriedly. "After everything you've been through with Warren, I'd understand if you need time, or if you don't feel the same way." Daisy silenced him by placing her fingers gently against his lips. "I love you too," she said simply. "I think I have for a while now. I was afraid to trust those feelings, afraid of belonging to someone again." "You don't belong to me, Daisy," Wyatt said, taking her hand and kissing her palm. "You belong to yourself. I just want the privilege of standing beside you if you'll have me." It was the most perfect thing he could have said in acknowledgement of her independence, even as he offered his heart. Daisy rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his in answer. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but deepened as Wyatt's arms tightened around her waist. Unlike Warren's demanding, punishing kisses, Wyatt's was an invitation, a promise, a conversation between equals. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I should go," Wyatt said reluctantly, though he made no move to release her. "Miss Martha has strict rules about gentlemen callers after dark." Daisy smiled, resting her head against his chest. "Will you come back tomorrow?" "And every day after, if you'll let me," he promised, pressing a kiss to her forehead. The next morning, Daisy woke to sunshine and possibility. For the first time in her adult life, she was truly free of Warren, free of fear, free to choose her own path. and she knew with certainty what path she wanted. Wyatt was waiting for her on the boarding house porch, his face lighting up when she appeared. They walked together to the telegraph office, where Daisy sent a message to Mrs. Hollister in Santa Fe, politely declining the position that had been offered. "Are you sure?" Wyatt asked as they left the office. "You don't have to stay in Redemption Springs just because of me." "I'm staying because I want to," Daisy replied. "This town has bad memories, yes. But it also has the first good ones I've had in years. I'd like to make more of those." Wyatt's smile was worth any uncertainty she might have felt. "I'd like that too." Over the following months, they built a life together piece by piece. Daisy continued working at the general store, gradually taking over the bookkeeping as Mr. Farley's eyesight worsened. Wyatt recovered fully from his injuries and became known throughout the county as a fair but uncompromising lawman. They courted properly, with chaperone dinners at Miss Martha's table, Sunday walks after church, and long conversations on the boarding house porch. Wyatt was unfailingly patient, never pushing for more than Daisy was ready to give, always treating her with a respect that healed old wounds Warren had inflicted. When Warren's trial came, Daisy traveled to the county seat to testify, Wyatt by her side. She faced her former husband across the courtroom without flinching, telling her story clearly and completely. Warren's hatred burned in his eyes as she spoke, but for the first time, it had no power over her. The judge sentenced Warren to 15 years in territorial prison for his crimes. As he was led away in chains, he spat one final threat in Daisy's direction. "I'll find you when I get out, no matter how long it takes." Wyatt's arm tightened protectively around her shoulders, but Daisy simply looked Warren in the eye and said calmly, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." And she wasn't. 6 months to the day after Warren had ridden back into Redemption Springs for the final confrontation, Wyatt took Daisy back to his cabin in the mountains. The meadow was lush with summer wildflowers, the stream sparkling in the sunshine. But it was the cabin itself that took Daisy's breath away, freshly painted, with curtains at the windows, a larger bed, and a rocking chair on the porch. "I've been coming up here on my days off," Wyatt explained as he helped her down from the wagon. "Getting it ready." "Ready for what?" Daisy asked, though her heart already knew the answer. In response, Wyatt took her hand and led her to the center of the meadow. There, surrounded by wildflowers and with the mountains as witness, he knelt on one knee. "Daisy Calloway," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I love you more than I ever thought possible. You're the bravest, strongest woman I've ever known. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Joy bubbled up inside Daisy like a spring. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, Wyatt O'Malley, I will marry you." He slipped a simple silver ring onto her finger, not ostentatious, but beautiful in its clean lines and perfect fit. As he stood and gathered her into his arms for a kiss that sealed their promise, Daisy knew she had found what she'd been searching for all along, not just escape, but a true home. Not just safety, but love. Not just freedom from, but freedom to. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Redemption Springs, with Miss Martha, the Farleys, Morgan, and his sister in attendance. Daisy wore a new dress of pale blue silk, and Wyatt couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle toward him. The minister's words echoed in the sunlit church. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." As Wyatt slipped a gold band onto her finger to join the silver engagement ring, Daisy felt the rightness of this union down to her bones. This was a marriage of equals, built on respect and love rather than possession and fear. They spent their wedding night in the mountain cabin, which was to be their weekend retreat while maintaining their residence in town. As Wyatt carried her across the threshold, Daisy felt none of the fear that had marked her first wedding night with Warren. Instead, there was joy and anticipation as Wyatt lovingly showed her what true intimacy between a man and woman could be: tender, respectful, and deeply pleasurable for both. In the years that followed, Daisy and Wyatt built a life that exceeded all the dreams she'd had during her darkest days with Warren. The town prospered under Wyatt's protection, eventually appointing him sheriff when the previous one retired. Daisy purchased the general store when the Farleys decided to move east to be near their grandchildren, turning it into a thriving business that served the growing community. They had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, all with Wyatt's green eyes and Daisy's quiet determination. Their family home, built on a plot of land not far from town, became known for its hospitality and warmth. The fear that Warren might someday return faded with time, especially after they received word that he had died in prison during an attempted escape in his 10th year of incarceration. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Wyatt took Daisy back to the mountain cabin, now weathered but still solid. As they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the meadow in gold, Daisy leaned her head against her husband's shoulder. "Do you ever think about that day we first met?" she asked. When Warren was shooting at me in the street, Wyatt's arm tightened around her. "I think about it sometimes, about how close I came to not intervening." Daisy looked up at him in surprise. "You almost didn't step in." "For about half a second," he admitted. Not out of fear, but because in every town I'd worked in before, the unwritten rule was that a man's treatment of his wife was private business. His fingers laced with hers, the matching gold bands on their ring fingers catching the fading light. "But something in your eyes when you looked up from behind that water trough. I couldn't walk away." "I'm glad you didn't," Daisy said softly. "You saved my life that day." Wyatt shook his head. "No, Daisy, you saved your own life by being brave enough to try to leave. I just helped a little along the way." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "And in the end, you saved me too." "We saved each other," Daisy corrected, settling more comfortably against him as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the mountain sky. It was true. The frightened woman who had hidden behind a water trough that day was gone, transformed by love and courage into someone stronger than she had ever imagined possible. And the solitary lawman who had built a cabin in the wilderness to escape his own demons had found healing in the family they had created together. As twilight settled over the meadow that had witnessed both their greatest fears and their greatest joys, Daisy and Wyatt O'Malley held each other close, grateful for the day a desperate woman had tried to escape and a principled lawman had stepped into the line of fire, changing both their lives forever.